and the Word was God. And when you hear the word from God, it will enable you to experience your intrinsic innate nature as the divine. Chapter 14. We are going through the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, line number 53. Now, we are coming to the final section, which deals with a trial of Jesus and his subsequent crucifixion. And as the gods of the priest they came to the garden where Jesus and his disciples were, and they took Jesus away. So line 53 says, and they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes. So the guards and the servants of the high priest, they came with clubs and sticks and swords and led Jesus to the high priest, to the home of the high priest, wherein a group of people were gathered. They were all assembled there, the chief priest and the elders and the scribes. It was a council meeting of the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish council meeting. And they had all gathered there to discuss matters of Jesus. And while this was taking place, and Peter followed him afar off, and Peter quietly followed them at a distance, and he even entered into the palace of the high priest. Quietly, he too also entered into the palace, and he sat with the servants and warmed himself at the fire. And he very quietly sat with the servants and warmed himself in the fire. So it was one more person. It didn't matter to whom, as to who it was, who was warming himself. In the meantime, the chief priests and all the council sought for witnesses against Jesus to put him to death. So now the Sanhedrin, the council of the Jews, the religious council, they were looking for witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, so that they can put him to death, they can kill him. But unfortunately for them, they found none. They couldn't find proper witnesses, because you can only find a witness if somebody had done a crime. And here Jesus had not done any crime at all. So therefore, how could they find any witnesses? So therefore found none. But nevertheless, for many bare false witness against him. But there were a few others. Always you will find that situation. Unfriendly, hostile people coming up and giving false witness against him. But unfortunately for them, but their witness agreed not together. That is, their testimony did not agree. For you need at least 2 or more people to testify against a person, and this testimony should coincide. Both the testimonies should corroborate each other. And it should be either 2 or more, according to the council at that time. And they couldn't find them. But their witness agreed not together. They couldn't find it because when you begin giving wrong evidence, of course, it's difficult to find 2 wrong evidences agreeing with each other. And then in the meantime, in line number 57, and there arose certain other persons and bear false witness against him. Though in the commandments, the 10 commandments, it is very well mentioned, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. That's a very important commandment, because when you make a when you give false evidence, you're committing that man to injustice and perhaps death even. So it's a grievous crime to do so. So therefore, all along they knew that to bear false witness against anybody, even at that time, and so to today too, is a great error indeed. But nevertheless, certain peoples, there arose certain and who bore false witness against him, saying, and what did they say? They said something very interesting. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I'll build another made without hands. Of course, that is no evidence to persecute him. You can say anything. And of course, Jesus did say that I will destroy this temple. And we will look into what John has to say about this. The Gospel of John, why Jesus had to make that statement. Why he had to make that statement, that unusual statement. Of course, that was not a crime to make it. And for Jesus had entered the temple, according to John, and he had scattered the money changers and upset the tables and scourged the people around. And then Jesus mentioned that you have made my Father's house a house of merchandise. You have made it into a business setup. And his disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. The zeal of thy house. So they had made it into a marketplace, the temple. And for Jesus having done this, then answered the Jews and said unto him, all right, you have done this, thinking that you are a great person. All right, they told him, and the Jews told him, what sign showeth thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things? What sign can you show to us? They wanted a sign. By which authority Jesus threw the money changers away. And Jesus replied, Jesus answered and said unto them, he didn't say, I will destroy. He said, destroy this temple. Destroy this temple. He didn't say, I will destroy. He just merely mentioned to them, you destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And in 3 days I'll raise it up. You do the job of destroying the temple, but I'll raise it up in 3 days. So therefore, Jesus did not indicate a criminal intention. And as such, he could not be prosecuted, because he didn't say, I will destroy, but he said, you destroy this temple. And in 3 days, I will raise it up. Then said the Jews, no, 46 years was this temple in building. It took us 46 years to build this temple. And you say that, wilt thou bring it up in 3 days? How will you bring it up in 3 days? How could you raise it in 3 days? So the temple which was built with hands, it took 46 years to build. And then Jesus says after that I'll raise it up without hands in 3 days. Without hands, I'll raise it up. And then, but what Jesus meant was, but he spake of the temple of his body. Now, this is where the interesting thing is. But he spake of the temple of his body. So it is the human body is the temple of God. Is the temple, is a real temple of God, the human body. And now we come back. So Jesus says, I will build another temple made without hands. Made without hands. Since the human body is the temple, what really happens is that there's a connection here. There's a connection between the parable which he had given earlier about the sower and the seed, and the mustard seed parable, in which he mentions that the word of God, the seed, which is said to be the word of God, it enters into the mind state, into the field, which is the mind state of an individual. And just as much as the seed, which is put into soil, the mustard seed or any other seed which is put into the soil, in due course, and you watch day and night, and the seed itself transforms itself within the earth. It undergoes a process of transformation and emerges out as a shoot. And you just keep on watching it from above. And it mysteriously takes place over a few days. You watch it over day and night. So also, when a person, the body is a temple of God, and the mind is the guest chamber in which you're having your sup with the good Lord during the time of the act of a prayerful state. And the prayerful state is a meditative state wherein you are intensely focused within, and you have become aware. That's what Jesus says. Be aware and pray. That's all that he said. So be aware and be in a prayerful state. And during this process, when you get self-absorbed within yourself, and you are entering into a mystic state, wherein you get so absorbed, you become so immersed in it that you begin to lose your outer awareness. And at the same time, while being in this state over days and nights, just like the seed which was immersed into the soil, so also within your own mind, the chambers of your mind, a transformation is taking place, wherein there is a transmuting taking place. Just like a caterpillar transmuting and becoming a beautiful butterfly, all of a sudden it happens. So also within yourself, this transformation is taking place. And all your worldly impressions, which were lying latent in the subconscious of your mind, they are being neutralized and getting neutralized by the act of God awareness, which nullifies it, nullifies all the worldly impressions. And by this process, you get transmuted as a new individual, as a new person, just like the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And this is what is indicated. This was also indicated by Jesus in his transfiguration in the mountains, wherein from one state he got into another state, the transfiguration of Christ. So it is that particular condition or state of affairs which Jesus is referring to in this section. That when he said that in 3 days I'll build another made without hands. Made without hands. So he's referring to that mysterious process which transpires within each person when one enters the mystical state of mystic absorption, or in Hindu terminology, it is called as getting into samadhi. Wherein you are totally self-absorbed within yourself, unaware of the phenomena around you. And therefore, this is what Jesus indicates, that I will build without hands. Another within 3 days. And this they couldn't comprehend nor understand. Then, not only that, Jesus demonstrated this truth that I will, after his crucifixion, after crucifixion, the resurrection transpired over a period of 3 days and 3 nights. He was in the tomb. And then the resurrection took place. So Jesus gave a practical demonstration and he emerged out of the tomb. The old Jesus was no more. Now he has been resurrected. So here, that is what it means here. So therefore, everything is in good order. What has been mentioned all through. So there is the parables and the teachings are synchronizing, one following the other. There is a correlation. And now we have come to this point. So therefore, this is, even though the statement seems to be so innocuous, it has got very profound implications. When he said that, I will build this in 3 days, and he did demonstrate this practically at the time of his crucifixion. Nevertheless, now to get on with the ensuing dialogue, since they couldn't find any proper witnesses, as none of the witnesses agreed together, and then the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, saying, as a last resort, the high priest asked, answerest thou nothing? Why is it that you don't say anything? Answerest thou nothing for all our accusations? What is there to answer? When you are innocent of everything, how can you answer? There is no need to answer. So Jesus remained in silence during the proceedings. And then the chief priest asked him a question. Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed Lord? Now, the word Christ is equivalent to the word Messiah. In the Jewish culture, it is called as Messiah. In the Greek, Christ, the Greek tradition. So they asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed Lord? Now, that is an improper question. It's an improper. It is called in the courts of law, it is called self-incriminating evidence. You can't ask a question which self-incriminates you as a reply. You can't ask that. But nevertheless, since Jesus had been asked, art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am, because that was the truth. That was the truth. Therefore, he said, I am. So that means Jesus is affirming in the court of the Sanhedrins that he is the Messiah. He has been the promised Messiah who has not been accepted by the Jews. So he says, I am. And then he continued and said, you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Since I am the Son of Man, since I am the Son of the Blessed, as son, when the time arises, when the need arises, I too will come to humanity via the clouds, sitting. I'll be Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power. That means it's a way of expressing. It's an expression that he's one with God, to indicate that he's one with God. And whenever the need arises, he would come via the clouds for whatever purpose, coming in the clouds of heaven. So via the clouds, mysteriously descends and manifests to mankind in some form or the other. Then when Jesus gave this reply, then the high priest rent his clothes. He got very angry and he rent his clothes, he tore his clothes and said, what need we any further witnesses? We don't require any further witnesses in this matter. You have heard, all of you have heard what he said. It is blasphemy. It is blasphemy, blasphemous talk, to declare that I am the Messiah, the Son of God. As far as the Jews were concerned, it was blasphemy for them. So, because they had not accepted, and they were still waiting for the Messiah, and they are still waiting. After 20th century, they are still waiting. And they'll keep on waiting, even though he came 20 centuries earlier. So now, they said it's a blasphemous statement. And therefore, for blasphemy, at that time, because it is a very powerful statement to declare that I am the Messiah who came from God, the straight descent of God into man. And therefore, the chief priest said, "But thank you." They all condemned him to be guilty of death. And at that same time, they condemned to be, said he is guilty and should be put to death. For at that time in the Jewish culture, that for blasphemy, a person is put to death. And it's a very peculiar way of putting a man to death. They would stone him. They have dug a pit, they would dig a pit and put the man into the pit, and from above they would stone him. They would stone him to death. So that was the Jewish way of killing a person. And many of the disciples of Jesus succumbed to that subsequently, that process later on by the Jews, by the Jews at that time. And they all condemned to be guilty of death. And then they not only stopped with that, and some began to, line number 65, and some began to spit on him. No, they began to spit on him. That's not a nice thing to spit on a person. You can do anything, but to spit on a person is a very shameful thing, very bad thing, and it's a shameful thing. You never spit on a person. Not only on a person, you don't even spit on an animal. But to speak of a human being, it is a very contemptuous behavior, unbecoming, unworthy of a good or a noble individual. But nevertheless, that's what they did. Some began to spit on him, and then to cover his face and to buffet him. And they covered his face with a piece of cloth, and they began buffeting him, pushing him here and there. Buffeting him means pushing him here and there, having his face covered. And then they told him, "Prophecy, now tell us, now that we have covered you with a piece of cloth or a sackcloth or a sackcloth. Now prophesy, since you have been prophesying so far, all these days. Now prophesy and say, who is the one who is buffeting you, who's pushing you, who's striking you? Come on, tell us." And the servants did, and of course, to all this, Jesus kept quiet. He kept quiet. There was nothing else that he could do. They pushed him around, buffeted him, and said, "Prophesy." And the servants did strike him with the palms of their hands, and the servants too struck him with their palms of their hands. And this was happened. So Jesus was ill-treated and mistreated by the Jewish council of Sanhedrins. And all that because they were so angry with him. They were so frustrated and angry with him. And then line number 66. "And as Peter was beneath in the palace, there cometh one of the maids of the high priest." Now we come to another section dealing with our wonderful friend Peter. Our wonderful Peter, who had quietly followed Jesus into the residence of the high priest. And one of the maids of the high priest, when she saw Peter warming himself, and he was warming on in front of the fire, Jesus, like with everybody else, she looked upon him and said, and she told him, "Art thou also wast with Jesus of Nazareth? Were you not also with Jesus of Nazareth?" She looked at him quite strongly and said, "Were you not also one of them?" But he denied, but Peter denied. Peter immediately denied. I know not, Jesus." neither do I understand what you are talking about, what thou sayest. I don't even understand what thou sayest. And he went out into the porch, and he quietly went to the porch. And at that moment, the cock crew. The cock crowed at that time. So on the first denial of Peter, the cock crowed. And then subsequently, and another maid saw him again, and the maid saw him again, and began to say to them that stood by, and told the others who stood by along with Peter in the other guards, this is one of them. Once again, she said, another maid said, this is one of them. And again, and he denied it again. He denied it again. And then, having denied it again, and a little later, the guards who were also along with Peter warming themselves up, they that stood by said again to Peter, hey, Peter, hey, you didn't call him by Peter, hey, surely thou art one of them? Surely you are one of them? The guards now ask Peter, you are one of them? Surely you must be. Why? For thou art a Galilean? For you are a Galilean? Why? Thy speak and thy speech agreeth thereto, and your speech agreeth accordingly. It's a very interesting thing. A language spoken even in a small area like Israel at that time, in different parts of Israel, the Aramaic language was spoken by people had a different way of pronouncing it. Even today, you know that even an English language, which is spoken in England, even in England too, gets spoken with different accents and different ways. And you can discover from which part of the country the person is. The person is from which part, because their accent and their way of speaking is different from region to region, though they all speak in the same language. So therefore, the guards around, they said, you are one of the Galileans, you're a Galilean, you speak like a Galilean. But at that time, moment they told that to Peter, and he began to curse and to swear, and Peter began to curse and to swear. Say, what are you fellows talking like this? I am not saying, I know not this man of whom you speak. I do not know this man, this Jesus about whom you're talking about. I do not know anything about him. And then the second time the cock crew, and when Peter denied it the third time, the cock crew the second time. And second time the cock crew. And Peter called to mind the word that Jesus had said unto him. And then at that time, Peter remembered the prophecy of Jesus when he said that you will deny me 3 times before this night is out. And the cock will crow 2 times. And you will deny me 3 times, which is a prophecy given by Jesus. And he remembered that before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice, and you shall deny me thrice. That's what you did. And when he thought thereof, he wept. Peter wept. How true it was, and how weak he was. In sadness he wept. You weep in sadness, and you also weep in joy. So here was an instance, in sorrow he was weeping. Now we come to chapter 15. So now Jesus was under trial 2 times. First by the Jews, wherein he was condemned for blasphemy. For blasphemy, he was condemned by the Jews. But the Jews did not want to kill him. So what they did was they handed him over to the Romans. And chapter 15 begins that. And straight away in the morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. Pontius Pilate was the governor of the region at that time. And early in the morning, straight away in the morning, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes, and they bound Jesus. They tied him up and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate, Pontius Pilate, who was the governor at that time. And then Pilate asked him a question. Art thou the king of the Jews? Art thou the king of the Jews? Because that is the accusation. And he answered and said unto them, thou sayest it. It is you say it. Thou sayest it. It is only you who say it. It is you who say it. I don't say that I am the king of the Jews. That's the implication. Thou sayest it. Because Jesus knew that he is not the king of the Jews. He is the king of the whole universe. And he didn't come here to be the king of the Jews. He came to be a Messiah for the entire humanity. And a Messiah is not a king. Though Jews are waiting for a king to rescue and save them from their miserable state and condition. So therefore, the Pontius Pilate asked him, because the rumor had got to him now and he has been accused, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus gave a right answer. He said, it is you, thou sayest it. It is you who say it. Though unfortunately, some of the other version, the NIV version declares, the NIV version says, yes, it is as you say. Jesus replied, that word yes is incorrect. Because Jesus would never have said that he is the king of the Jews. Even though that is how it has been translated in the NIV version of the Bible. So, but the King James version is more correct when it says, thou sayest it. It is you who say it, my dear Pilate. Pontius Pilate, it is you who say it. I don't acknowledge it. Neither did I say it. Then, and the chief priest accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. And the chief priest began accusing him of many things, but he answered nothing. But Jesus did not give any answer, in spite of all the accusations heaped upon him. And Pilate asked him again, saying, answerest thou nothing? Why is it that you don't answer to the accusations? Behold, how many things they witness against thee? How many evidences to which, and they say many things testify against you in various ways. They say many things, they testify against you in various ways, but still you don't answer anything. But Jesus yet answered nothing. But he never answered to any one of the accusations. And to that, so that Pilate marveled. Pontius Pilate, he marveled at it. In spite of all the accusations being heaped upon him, here in this, Jesus maintained his composure, did not reply, kept quiet, and this made Pontius marvel at the demeanor of Jesus. He said nothing, and he marveled at Pontius Pilate marveled at the non-reply of Jesus. He Then at that time, nevertheless, but at that feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. Now I'll take to the other book, which is a little more lucid in its presentations, because it's just. Now it was a custom at the feast to release a prisoner. At the feast of the Passover, it was a custom of the Romans to release a prisoner whom the people requested. So the people would request some prisoner to be released and the governor would release them. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionist. And there was also a man called Barabbas who was in prison with the insurrectionist because he had insurrected against the Romans and who had committed murders in the uprising, and he had killed quite a few people, and therefore he too was going to be condemned to death. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he actually did. And the crowd came up to Pontius Pilate and asked him to do what he normally did. And what he normally did was to release one prisoner. Release one prisoner. So Pontius Pilate asked, do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him, knowing very well that it was out of sheer envy. You know, envy and jealousy are two terrible things. And they were envious of Jesus. The priests are always envious of all holy people because they are on two diametrically opposite lines. They follow they are on two different levels of operating and functioning. And the priests are always hostile and unfriendly. And they envy the holy people, the saints of the world. So Pontius Pilate, knowing it was out of envy, that it was only out of envy that the chief priest had handed Jesus over to him, it was just out of sheer envy and fear that they had handed over to him, that Pilate knew. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. So Pilate asked, do you want me to release Jesus? But then what happened? The priest, they instigated the multitude crowd which had gathered there to have Barabbas released. Instead of Jesus, Barabbas released. To have Pilate release Barabbas instead. And then Pilate asked, what shall I do then? What shall I do then? With the one you call the king of the Jews? What shall I do with this man whom you call as the king of the Jews? What shall I do with him? And the people said, crucify him, crucify him. Crucify, they shouted. Why should I crucify him? So Pontius Pilate is asking, why should I crucify him? What crime has he committed? He must commit some crime to be crucified. So since he had not committed any crime, how could I crucify him? So what crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. So Pilate was more just than the Jewish priest. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him, and the mob began shouting, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. So therefore, Pontius Pilate, wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He released Barabbas, and he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. So he had Jesus flogged. So before crucifixion, flogging the person is one of the earlier acts, and handed him over to the soldiers to be crucified. Then, having done that, what did the soldiers do? The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, into the governor's palace, into the courtyard, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They all called together all the other soldiers. And what did they do? They still want to mock at him. They put a purple robe on him, a purple robe, because generally a purple robe is worn by the royalty. It's a sign of royalty. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns. They twisted together a reed of thorns and set it on him and put it on his head. And they began to call out to him, and the soldiers began to now mock him. They began to mock him. So first they put a purple robe on him, a crimson robe, and then a thorn, indicating it's a crown of thorns. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they began saying, "Hail to the King of the Jews," mockingly. Again and again, they struck him on the head with a staff. And again, they struck him with a staff. So not only that, they struck him, they beat him with a staff and spat on him. And they also spat on him. And then not only that, they mockingly falling on their feet, on their knees. They paid homage to him. They fell on their knees and paid homage to the king. Yeah? So it was a mocking ceremony done by the soldiers. They were mocking at Jesus. So to what extent humans can deprave themselves if they want to insult somebody? And that's exactly what they were doing. They were insulting Jesus in all manner of ways. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put on his own clothes on him. And having done this, they took the purple robe away and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. And then they took him in order to crucify him. Now, so they put on his clothes and led him out to crucify him. And while they were proceeding towards to the place wherein they were going to crucify him, they compelled one Simon who passed by, coming out of the country, the father of Alexander Rufus, to bear his cross. Now, this is something very interesting. As they were taking him to Golgotha, where he was going to be crucified. Golgotha is a mountainous, is a little hill, and wherein they were leading him at that time. Now they had given Jesus a cross to carry up to the hilltop, and it was very heavy indeed, and Jesus finding it very difficult to carry it and drag it. So at that time there appeared a man called Simon out of nowhere, and they asked him to bear the cross, and they asked him to carry or support the cross, to bear his cross. Now hear the word, to bear his cross. This happens to every person in life. When every person goes through his hardships of life, unseen to the person, God comes in some mysterious form to lighten his burden of life according to the situation and circumstance. So that is why it is said to bear his cross. So when you bear your cross of life, then unknown to you, unseen by you, God comes and helps you to bear the cross and the hardships and the difficulties of life which you are going through. So here also, in this instance, a lesson is being given to humanity that you too, when you go through your hardships and in total despair, then at that time, to lighten your burden, God's unseen strength comes into you according to the situation that you are in. So to bear his cross. So that is what is implied here. And then they bring him, the soldiers bring him onto the place called Golgotha. Golgotha is the place where they crucified Jesus on the cross, which is being interpreted the place of a skull, because it appeared like a skull, that particular hilltop. And then they gave him to drink wine mingled with myrrh. So to ease the pain of the crucifixion, they gave him wine mingled with myrrh herb. But he received it not, but he didn't accept it. And when they had crucified him, they parted his garments. And this is exactly what they did. They crucified him, and his garments were there, and they cast lots upon them. With every man should take what each person should take of his garment. So they cast lots. So they didn't want to rip and tear the garment. They said, we'll take the garment by casting lots, by lotting who will get the garment. And then this happened. This crucifixion began, the process of crucifixion began. It was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him in the 3rd hour. It was the 3rd hour. Now, what is the 3rd hour? The Jewish day begins at 6 a.m. in the morning and ends at 6 p.m. in the evening. So these proceedings had taken place. His trial had taken place at 6 o'clock itself. And by 9 o'clock, he was led for his crucifixion. So Jesus was crucified at 9 o'clock in the morning. So early in the morning, 3 hours. So it was the 3rd hour they crucified him. That is at 9 a.m. in the morning. And then, having crucified him, they wrote a superscription of his accusation was written over. Of course, when you crucify the person, you also write something for what purpose he had been crucified. And the reason why he was crucified was he was said to be the king of the Jews. That was the reason. There has to be a reason why he was crucified, and the crucifixion, the purpose was he had claimed that he was the king of the Jews. He's the king of the Jews. And they wrote it on a board, on a board, and affixed it on the cross, stating that the king of the Jews. And this writing was in 3 languages. It was in Aramaic, Greek, and Latin, the Roman language. It was in 3 languages. And this particular placard, the placard, which was written in 3 languages, was recently discovered by the archaeologist. The archaeologist, they discovered this recently, and it was confirmed that this placard, the wooden board or the placard, was indeed 2,000 years old by carbon dating. They had come to know that it was 2,000 years old, and in which in 3 languages, the crime of, or the offense of Jesus was indicated. The offense was the king of the Jews. Of course, the Romans would not want anybody to be the king, to rival their Roman rule. So this was the reason. And along with Jesus, with him they crucified two thieves too. Along with him, two thieves were also crucified. The one on his right hand and the other on his left. So three thieves were also, two other persons were also crucified along with Jesus. And the scripture was fulfilled which saith, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he was numbered along with two transgressors, two criminals. Then, and they that passed by and the people that passed by railed on him, wagging their heads and saying, "Ah, thou had destroyed the temple and build it in 3 days. You are the person who said that you will destroy the temple and build it in 3 days. Now try to save yourself. Come down from the cross and try to save yourself." So some of the people around, assembled people, said this. Likewise also, similarly also, the chief priests mockingly said amongst themselves with the scribes, "He saved others." Of course, Jesus saved others, but himself he could not save himself. He had saved others, the scribes. And the chief priest said, but he could not save himself. Line number 32. "Let Christ, the King of Israel, descend now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Let Christ, the King of the Israel, the chief priest is now telling, chief priest and other scribes are saying, let the Christ, the Messiah, the King of the Israel, descend now from the cross, that we may see and believe, that he is truly the Messiah. So these are mocking words used by the priest and the scribes. Let us now see if Jesus can come down from the cross. Then we will believe that he is the Messiah. And they that were crucified with him reviled him. And the other two prisoners who were crucified with him, they also reviled him. So now, something very interesting is going to happen in the area after the crucifixion of Jesus. It's a very significant thing which transpired. So as we said, Jesus was taken to trial early in the morning at 6, and he was crucified at 9. 9 in the morning. Then when the 6th hour was come, when the 6th hour means 12 noon, when the time became 12 noon, something remarkable happened there. There was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. From 12 noon to 3 p.m., the entire area and the countryside mysteriously became dark. There was darkness. And this has been recorded, I am told, in the history. There was a mysterious darkness which took place at that time. They couldn't comprehend why or what happened. But there was darkness in the whole land until the 9th hour, until 3 p.m. until 3 p.m. And then thereafter, at the 9th hour, so the 9th hour is 3 p.m. 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So Jesus was crucified at 9 in the morning. And now at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, which was 6 hours, after 6 hours, which was at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, at the 9th hour in the afternoon, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, with a loud voice, Jesus burst out and said, in the Aramaic language, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Now here too also this particular statement apparently made by Jesus and so recorded has not been properly translated. The way they have translated is, which is an incorrect translation from my point of view, but I feel it is an incorrect translation. So that translation reads as, which is being interpreted as, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So that was not what Jesus would have said. So there is something incorrect in the translation. Rather, what Jesus would have said is, I forsake myself in your hands. I forsake myself in your hands would have been a more appropriate and a correct interpretation. Because a person like Jesus would never have said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Would never have come out of the lips of Jesus. But rather, all the translations which you find, they are only giving this version, this statement, which I feel is not quite correct, as Jesus would have never mentioned this. But rather, more correctly, there is an error somewhere there in their comprehension and translation of that section. Instead, Jesus would have said, instead, what Jesus would have said is, I forsake myself unto thee. Or he would have said, I give myself unto thee. I release myself unto thee. That's exactly what Jesus would have mentioned. Consciously, at will, he would have departed. He would have departed. So therefore, this is something very very intriguing, this statement. And then, so therefore it has to be re-looked and re-examined in the proper context. And then some of them that stood by When they heard it said, behold, he calleth Elias. Because Eloi means, it's sounding it for the people around. It may mean Elias, Elias. So some of them thought he's calling Elias the prophet. No, it was not that. So he was not calling Elias. So his reference was, Eloi, Eloi, my God, I forsake myself unto thee. Very graciously, he would release himself. And that's exactly what Jesus would have done. And then one of those persons there, one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink, saying, so since he was up on the cross, few feet away, so one person took a stick, put a sponge of vinegar and tried to put it into his mouth and gave him to drink, saying, let alone. Let us see whether Elias will come to take him down. And let us see whether Elias will bring him down. But not so. And Jesus cried with a loud voice. With a loud voice, he mentioned, and gave up the ghost. And gave up the ghost on his own accord. On his own accord. He left, gave up the ghost. He got detached from his human individuality. From his human individuality. That's what it means. Gave up the ghost. Because the human individual is a soul indeed. It's just like a spirit. And he gave it up and released himself from that. He released and he got detached from it. He got detached. So, in a sense, Jesus got detached from his human individuality, released himself, and regained his divine status. Now, there was an interesting incident. How an individual releases himself in this manner. It was practically demonstrated in Jaffna by a saint, a holy man called Chellappa Swami, who in a very ingenious manner gave up the ghost, gave up his individuality, his human individuality. The previous day itself, before he left the previous evening, he had mentioned to people that night something wonderful, mysterious is going to happen. They couldn't comprehend what it was. And the next morning when they went to see him, they found Chellappa Swami lying on the floor with one leg upon another leg. You know, when you sit with your leg with, how shall we say, when you lie down and put one leg in the 90-degree position, the 90-degree position, you put one leg, and then the other leg, you put it on top of that. On top of that, and they found him in such a state with his thumb in his mouth. With his thumb in his mouth. At that time, when I heard about it, I couldn't comprehend what its significance was long ago. Now I come to realize and feel that the act of putting his thumb into the mouth with such a posture, a childlike posture, he had assumed a childlike posture with one leg upon another, lying like a child, with a thumb in his mouth to indicate that he is at sup with the Lord. So that is why the thumb in the mouth signified and indicated that consciously he had left his spirit or his human individuality, which is his human individuality, got detached from it, and was now in sup with the Lord. He was one with the Lord, with a finger, with his thumb in his mouth. So that's a very parallel incident which took place, but in a different context. But that's what it means here, that Jesus gave up the ghost. He gave it up consciously, knowingly. He gave up. And then at that time, another mysterious thing transpired. And that was, when Jesus was crucified, three things happened. From 9 to 12, there was darkness. The whole countryside was filled with darkness. And then at about 3 o'clock, when he left his body, there was an earth tremor, an earthquake, which was felt as far as Greece. For the Greek historians recorded that there was an earthquake at that time. They couldn't comprehend why it took place, why there should be an earthquake. But they knew that it happened at this time, at this place. So at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, at that time, at the crucifixion of Jesus, there was an earthquake. That is the second thing. And thirdly, the veil in the temple of Jerusalem, the curtain, the veil, the inner curtain, rent asunder, it got torn apart. The veil in the temple, it got torn apart. Now, these are three significant things which happened at the time of crucifixion of Jesus. But the people could not comprehend its implications. Neither did they understand its implication at that time, nor have they understood it even today, what it really meant and signified. These three mysterious incidents, what they indicate, even today, the Christian world hasn't a clue, nor does it comprehend the mysterious phenomenon which transpired at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus. This is recorded by the historians that it so happened, it so transpired. They know it, but they can't account for it. Now, there is a meaning, a spiritual meaning here. There is a mystical meaning here in this, why this took place, why this particular incident, the situation transpired. First is darkness transpired between 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. 12 noon to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Darkness. When a person enters into his inner nature, initially he enters into a tunnel of darkness. There's only darkness there. When you close your eyes, there's nothing there, there's only darkness. So that darkness was indicated by the darkness outside. Then, as you successfully proceed through this darkness, And at the time, when 3 p.m. has transpired, 3 p.m. had transpired, then the world begins to crumble within you. The world's end takes place within you. Don't imagine that the world's end takes place outside. The end of the world will transpire within yourself. It will enter into you. The whole world will collapse into you. It will collapse into you. But don't be afraid when it happens. So that is symbolically indicated by the earthquake. The earth trembled, and they couldn't comprehend why it trembled. But what it signified was the whole universe collapses within yourself, into yourself. The whole universe collapses. And that's what the mystery was about. Then the third thing is, the veil in the temple got rent asunder. That means the veil which was covering you from your divine status got ripped apart, and you experienced your divine nature. So therefore, it's an ongoing threefold process. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. One leads to the second leads to the third. And the third, the veil in the temple got rent asunder. And even in the temples too, there you have a cloth, a veil, a curtain, which covers the sanctum sanctorum, wherein it is believed the divine lodgeth there. So therefore, when the veil gets torn, you would experience the divine which is there within yourself indeed. The veil which was covering you from your divine nature got ripped apart, and you began to experience your divine nature. So these were all symbolically indicated by this phenomenon which transpired out in the external world at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus. So therefore, even at the crucifixion of Jesus, a grand lesson or a great education is being given to mankind. And therefore, we have to look at the whole thing afresh as to the meaning and the significance of the crucifixion and the teachings of Jesus. So the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And when the centurion which stood over against him, and there was a centurion, the chief of the guards of the Romans, he saw what had transpired, the darkness, the earthquake, and the renting of the veil. And he cried out in his cries, loudly said, and the way Jesus loudly cried and said and gave up the ghost, gave up his human spirit, he said, truly this man was the Son of God. Truly this man is the Son of God indeed. So that was said by the centurion. So with this, we'll carry on with the balance tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll conclude it, this particular Gospel of mark.